can now. So fancy. Good afternoon. Thank you guys for coming. This is our inaugural Lunch and Learn, and we're super stoked that you signed up to come. And if you didn't sign up to come, thank you for coming anyway. We will always have a little spare for our friends who decide they want to learn at lunch and or they like what we're serving. So please come again. My name's Jenny Quarles, and I am the Director of Online Initiatives, a title I created here at Curry, because Curry is in the process of growing and transforming their online portfolio. And we decided we wanted to do this Lunch and Learn series to help both our graduate students who maybe are teaching or planning on going back into teaching after they graduate, either in K-12 or in higher ed, and our faculty have some conversations around our instructional technologies that support online learning, and also just online learning in general, right? So the challenges, the opportunities, the technologies, the lack of technologies, the headaches, the heartaches, the celebrations, the joys. So creating a space for that. So moving forward, every fall we'll have 3, every spring we'll have 3, always on the last Wednesday of the month until someone pushes me on that, but I just like it. So tell your friends if this goes well, come back. And we're also open to your suggestions for future topics or like themes. So if you're sitting here and something comes to mind, you know, feel free to share that with us after the fact. But I'm going to talk about our topic today, which is a common question I hear often from faculty, especially those who've been asked to move online versus like, oh, I really want to teach online, right? So it's not their field or their jam, this online learning world, but for whatever reason, it makes the most sense to start to go that way. And some of you, that might be your life. So I built it, right? Like I got everything together. I've built hopefully this beautiful course space. And now what? And by the now what, I really mean not so much like how do I teach, and we're not really going to talk about that today, but kind of all of the other nitty gritty stuff that comes with being an online faculty member. So that's where we're starting. We are going to have lots of topics in the future about very specific pedagogical theories and ideas around maximizing online learning. But today we're going to kind of take a step back and talk about what kind of complements the build. So hopefully you work with an instructional designer. This is my instructional design team on my left. Maybe you just are awesome and you know how to design stuff on your own, Sarah, because you have experience. So that's great. That's a good start. But it's still this foreign environment, and there's a lot more to teaching online than just building it. So now what? So hopefully today we will talk about these things, and you'll leave being able to tackle these. I'd like you to leave with actionable things. So I want you to be able to define what instructor presence is, and specifically how that pertains to presence online. And you may already have an idea. Hopefully I'm going to challenge or help you grow that idea of what presence really means. I want you to be thinking about the headaches of teaching online and how we can be proactive in addressing those headaches from the beginning so that you free up your time and your energy towards the things that are really important, like engaging with your students, providing meaningful feedback to them. And then lastly, I want to talk about expectation setting. At Curry, which is awesome, my favorite part about working in an ed school is that you guys care about learning outcomes and like very clear learning goals for your students. But I want to talk a little bit about expectation setting, because in an online course space, it might be clear what they're supposed to learn, right? The learning outcomes might be very clear and well articulated, as they often are in a Curry course. But the space between getting to that learning in this foreign virtual space that can somehow feel isolating, right, or empty, or inactive sometimes, right, or wrongly active, or all of these things that can be felt when you're an online student, how can we mitigate some of those by setting appropriate expectations? And so what does that look like? Sound good? Okay, cool. I'm going to ask you later if I did these things, so you can tell me if I did. All right, so I want us to talk a little bit first about this idea of presence. And so I have an article for you to leave with today. It's really a white paper, and it was done by Pearson. Don't judge it. It's actually done really well. And it really highlights, I think, like the trajectory of like research about presence in online spaces and really presence in teaching. So I wouldn't give it to you if I didn't think it was like actually good stuff. And the bibliography in the back is like pretty good. So you're gonna get that on your way out. My gift to you. Reading. I know you're so excited. But I have a little worksheet for us to be doing. You guys need some pens I have some. I'm gonna throw that one on the floor. Let me know. Let me know what's and Ashley will take the extras. So this is a two-sided little worksheet we're going to work through. And I want you to pick, the side we want to be on is the side about face-to-face teaching, which hopefully is what side was up when I gave it to you. So presence in face-to-face and presence in online often ends up being something very different. And the ways that we're going to talk about presence in online is going to be real different. But the first question I want you to think about for yourself is, how and when do you establish presence in face-to-face instruction? So what does that look like? And I really want you to think of the minutia of presence in face-to-face instruction. So what are all of those things? So go beyond the fact that maybe you're going to show up in a room together at a specific time, but what else about that experience? What else about that how and when? And maybe what are some of the adjectives that you would put to that presence? How would you describe that presence? So take a minute and then feel free to share with a neighbor, and then we're going to talk together. Do you need a pen? Yeah.
I only have highlighters.
That's hilarious.
I don't know.
Like, you know, you're like, pen?
Two pens sitting out.
Two pens. Thought you guys might be trusting my pen.
All I know is when I think about online stuff, I didn't think about pen for it.
Pens. I know people sometimes like to put pen to paper.
But I
There's
think
a
it's
marker near the.
well, I can just write it
Oh,
on my
there is a
laptop.
pen in there. I am gonna get these back from you though, because I'm obsessed with these pens.
Yeah, we don't want to.
There's a sad little pen here. Let's just make sure.
Oh, we're good.
They're Mujis. Dr. Brighton turned me on to those on my first day of employment here.
Insider secret.
Do you buy them on the Amazon? Or?
I do buy them on Amazon. I'm not going to tell you how much they are, so you don't judge me.
Oh, did you not understand what I was saying? They are green pens.
You guys can trade back and forth. We'll have a pen review after. Pen review. Mine's like a Uniball, but better. Sometimes I give them out. Yeah. When you earn them, I give them to them. I should set clear expectations with you about how to earn emoji. All right, Chris, who is in our gifted program, is working ahead, so we're going to start talking. No, you're fine. When inspiration strikes, we should take advantage. Okay, so what were some things that came to mind when you think about presence? Don't all talk at once. Okay, respect. And I think you're mentoring them, right, in how to behave, right, or you're mirroring, right, what you want to see. What else? Mm-hmm. Others?
Just having little mini conversations before and after class, just how was your weekend, how are you doing, type of thing, and just getting to know them face to face, you know, like their style and their appearances and stuff, so you can pick up on if something's wrong or, you know, well, they're looking pretty awesome that day. Why didn't you have your stuff?
So informal communications, yes, and building a rapport is what I'm hearing. Good. What else? I heard some good ones over here when you guys were.
I put eye contact and kind of like having a warm presence and a smile.
Yeah, absolutely. I purposely wore my sailboats today, but a blazer to say to you, professional yet whimsical, right?
I know.
So thank you. See, there you go. And I want her to leave being like, I don't remember her name, but she was professional and whimsical. You know, that's important to me. Yeah, it's a part of my presence. But warmth, absolutely, right? I like to try to make people laugh because I think it puts them at ease, right? So like the visual cues, the eye contact, I'm trying to like, you know, I don't get to teach a lot in person anymore. So I'm like, oh, I enjoy seeing your faces. Like, this is great. What else? My faculty, what did you guys think?
Yeah, put humor on.
Yeah? Cool.
I'm a very funny person.
I believe that you are, but you're also very quiet, so that makes me, yeah.
Deadpan is a form of
It
which does not translate well online. No.
is,
Oh, yeah,
it is a little
that's
more
true.
challenging. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Chris?
I was gonna say, not only like the getting to know the students, but like recognizing that and saying not to communicate to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So social interaction is really important. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about online course stuff. So the great news is this is called You Built It, Now What? So presence in online starts before you even have an interaction with those students. And this is, I would say, maybe a disadvantage sometimes for faculty, because some of the things that happens before you even interact with the students, you don't have a lot of control of. So think about a student's journey, especially a fully online student's journey, right? They want to take a class. It's a little laborious here at UVA, right? To like find out the class, figure it out, it's fully online. Why does it say it meets from 3:46 a.m. to 3:48 a.m., right? Sometimes an instructor is not even listed, right? So legitimately not even a name is present of like who's gonna be teaching this class. And then I'm gonna get into that class and, you know, maybe Curry's gonna use a new LMS. And I don't even know what system my class is gonna be in. And all of that can be really, really overwhelming. So sometimes as an online instructor, you're starting at a little bit of a disadvantage because that student went through a journey to even get to interact with you, right? And then often before, maybe you'll have some very early primary interaction with the students, like, hey, I'm so-and-so, and like, here's your syllabus, and I can't wait to see you the first week of class or day of class, whatever, which is great. But then they're getting into your actual documents, right? Or your course space. And so their first sense of you comes from interacting with those documents and interacting with that course space. And so a part of establishing presence in an online space is thinking about that design and that organization, but not just like the full course organization, but just like how organized are you, right? You know what I mean? Are you organized enough that you're like seeing new student emails and are you able to respond to them in a timely fashion? Are your documents organized in a logical way, right? Where they're reading and looking through things and they're like, oh, I get this, it resonates with me. So that's a big piece of the puzzle. So of course, again, you built it. So hopefully we've taken advantage of some of those like opportunities to deal with those questions and really bring in strong organization and design, but also bring in the warmth, right? Like, is your smiling face somewhere in your class? Is there a tone in your writing, right, that is welcoming and inviting? Are you getting your personality across? And if you've taught online, this is challenging, but it's really important. Then we can start talking about the other ways that you're going to bring in presence in an online space. So that's the facilitation, which should be in a lot of ways similar to how you would facilitate a face-to-face course. So a lot of those same like priorities or concerns or strategies are going to be applicable, but maybe we need to think about them in a different way. And then of course, you create presence through your instruction. So if you've ever waited to take a class with a specific faculty member, which I have done personally, it is often because you've heard about their instruction, right? And sometimes undergrad, it's because they're an easy grader, right? Or they're really nice or, you know, whatever. But when you get to the graduate level, it's often because they're an expert in X, Y, and Z, right? Or because they have this method of delivery that is funny, right? Or warm and inviting or collaborative, right? And so we're looking for those things. And all of that happens, needs to happen within an online course. And this is where how you behave as a faculty member or a teacher or instructor, facilitator of that course, and how it's designed, like really need to come together as one. So how are we going to do some of this? Images. Images are so important. Online learning is a very visual experience. We're doing more to bring in media that's also auditory, but for the most part, online learning is a very visual experience. People are reading a lot. They need to constantly see you. They want to see their classmates. They want to, if they're not in Charlottesville, and ironically, most of our online students are, 95% of our online students are actually in Virginia, and even about 50% of those are near Charlottesville. But they want to see images of what it means to be a who, right? So like they want to see the kind of collaborative, collaborative is not the word I want to look for. They want to see that community, right? That is Curry, but in their online space. Images are a great way to do that. Clarity is also really important. We were talking with I am not directly working with them, but Ashley was talking to me about working with a faculty member, and she had this epiphany that online students need more directions and that they need to be even more clear. And yeah, we can laugh, but if you're not an experienced online instructor, it's a journey to get to making clear directions that are, you know, not just readable, but concise. So I see an iteration where first there aren't enough directions. Then we go on the other side where there's so laboriously written out instructions that people stop reading them, to where we need to be, right? Which is some kind of in between where there's enough detail where we need detail, and there's enough brevity that we actually read them and can follow in them. So people think directions, that's not presence, but that's totally presence, right? And I have sat in face-to-face instruction where I have been given directions to do some kind of activity, and they're frankly not super clear. And how many have you seen the person turn to the neighbor and be like, what are we supposed to be doing, right? Or like, what did she say? We don't have neighbors to turn to in online instruction, or we don't have like immediate response with neighbors. So that makes it even more challenging to be successful in that environment. So the clearness of your directions and of your content is really important. Regular and reliable interactions. And I think this is where I think we can mirror face-to-face instruction. You don't have to be online 24/7. I started teaching online longer. I hope I look young, but I've taught online for a long, long time. And I started and I was online, honest to God, I think 24/7, to the point where my husband was like, you're going to die. You need to sleep. But I was so worried that my students, and these were community college students, right? You can lose them easily. I was so worried that they were going to struggle and quit, that I wanted to be responsive to their messages. And someone who was much more advanced than I was in online instruction at the time took me aside and was like, you need to stop this, right? And we talked a lot about reliable and regular interactions. So I started being present in my courses at specific times, and I was present and reliably present in my email and on chat or on Zoom at very specific, reliable times. And in doing that, I built a rapport with my students that I was going to be there for them and that their questions could be answered. And it wasn't 24/7, but it was reliable. The same thing with like my grading and my feedback. it was posted in a regular and reliable schedule. And that goes back to the design, right? So your course is to be designed in such a way that you can maintain that pace. And that's something we continue all to struggle with here, I think, at Curry, right? Where like we have so much we want to share and give to folks, and it becomes unrealistic. Then we can maintain regular and reliable interaction. We also need to vary those methods. It's really boring to like just get like a couple of written words of feedback. We have more tools and opportunity now and different ways that we can interact with folks. We can like narrate our comments. We can record them. I'm a composition teacher by trade. And so I used to screen capture my grading of papers. And so they would see like my process of looking at their writing, which helped them think about their writing process. I didn't do it all the time. It was a little time consuming, but it was a variation in how I gave feedback that was really engaging to my student population. And it made them feel like I was there. It made them feel like I was sitting next to them going through their paper.
Did you talk on it, or was it?
Oh yeah.
And then did you leave comments on it?
Yes. Yes. And in Canvas, by the way, you can do some of that screen capture, but you can also kind of Dragon style. If you guys are familiar with Dragon, you can turn that on and speak your comments while you're annotating, so that you can have like a narrative field of comments while you can have some specific annotations that are maybe dealing with like grammar and mechanics. Personal experiences. This is another big one. Almost all of you have had some kind of personal experiences in your field that really bring depth to the subject that you're teaching. And in face-to-face class, it feels very natural to share those anecdotes, right? Like maybe you're showing a video clip and you're talking maybe how you would have handled a situation, something like that. For whatever reason, they've done some studies on this. Personal experiences that are shared by faculty, but also peers, tend to drop off in online instruction. It's really interesting. But bringing in that, I was a K-12 teacher once too, right? And I've had these experiences, or I handled it this way, or part of the reason I got engaged in continuing my education was because of X, Y, and Z. Really add a sense of presence and a sense of your personality and who you are and why you're important, or like why you care about this field. That's really important for faculty to think about too, because when I write personal experiences, people think, oh, you want me to tell them how my weekend was? No, nope. They probably don't care. I'm sure it was wonderful. Chris likes to grow peppers. She doesn't like to eat them. Like, you know, I love that about her, interpersonal, right? But that's not what I'm talking about, right? But rather your personal experiences that are relative to the class itself. And everybody kind of mentioned this in their own way, but allowing for an engaging and encouraging social interaction in the online space. And I think this is super challenging to achieve. So online students do what's required, frankly, right? So if you're going to encourage this, you need to think about how you're going to require it, but not make it feel required, but like give some kind of credit for it, which is a hard, uncomfortable place to be. And so I called the last item here like the 3.0 of online teaching. If you can get really good at allowing for an encouraging social interaction, then you're a champion, and we should be putting you out on the conference circuit. Because it's hard. It's hard. It's not social media, and you're there for a reason. And people don't often have that opportunity to have those casual conversations that come so naturally in a face-to-face environment, like how was your weekend, or I got a B+ on this, this faculty member's terrible, I don't understand, whatever that might be, right? That those common bonds, right, that come through being in a room together multiple times per week or per semester. So thinking through how you can allow or provide for some of this. And a lot of those interactions that really create like bonding don't often come with like group work. Group work, as they've started to research this, actually causes feelings like that are antagonizing, and actually can like break down bonds, and actually can break the feeling of trust. So it's better to build up some rapport amongst those peers before assigning groups or before creating group activities, so that there are things that are built beforehand, like trust, like a sense of commonality and purpose and that kind of thing. And those are some of the topics that we're going to dive in a lot deeper as we do more of these like lunch and learns. We're gonna have some online badging opportunities where we're gonna dive into these nitty gritty specifics, but just something to think about. I'm gonna pause there. Any questions about presence? No? Cool. All right, so administrative stuff. Take a minute, use your handout. What tasks take up time? Administrative tasks, so not actual instruction and not building the course, but what else takes up administrative time when you're teaching in person? Mhm. Do you want some Advil? You're good. These folks like don't medicate, they just suffer.
I'm also.
All right, let's talk about it. What are some of these administrative tasks that bog you down?
Without a grading.
It does, it's true. Yep, that's true. I wasn't even thinking about that one, but that, as I like threw papers on the floor, it took up more time than I thought it would. What else?
Just like the setting up the space and plugging in all your tech.
Yeah. Yep. Well, also I love, it doesn't, I think it happens here less, but I walked in where I was planning on, like it's a classroom that's set up for groups and someone had put it lecture style or something like that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, when I walk in with 5 minutes and then the students who start pouring in, I'm like, who wants to move furniture? And we're like rebuilding the classroom. What else? Yep. And also, what about tracking people down? I mean, maybe you don't care. That's cool if you don't. I would like look for people. Like I would be like, has anyone seen Jamie? Like,
Yeah.
has she been in any of her other classes? Anything else? You guys are you're just unburdened by administration. What about going to SIS? Getting your roster, entering final grade. Everyone loves that. Okay, good. No problems.
And there's also like classroom management set up of materials. And things, too. I mean, even if you're face-to-face, I gave a novel.
Yeah, that's true. However you're going to deliver that, yeah, that stuff. Absolutely. Going through books too and like picking materials. Yeah, is it? Yeah. I do put that more in like the content bucket than general administration, but I think that's definitely a piece of the pie. So when we start thinking about online learning, we often hear these are the top 4 of the administrative burdens that arguably are maybe not as connected to face-to-face learning as perhaps presence is, right? So email quantity. This comes back to that clear instruction situation. And just generally, again, students feeling like the need to connect to that person. So a common burden is that just the sheer amount of email for an online class is way more than in person. Also repetitive questions. So because if we're here in this class and Chris asks me a question, theoretically, if you're paying attention, you will hear my answer to Chris's question. And 90% of you probably will. The other 10% might send the same question later or ask it in another class. But in an online class, this can get way out of hand really quickly, especially if you're not clear. So repetitive questions. Digital feedback. And this took me a long time to get used to. There was a time, again, English teacher, right, where I would like get the papers in person. They would hand them to me, and I had my like color-coded highlighters, my highlighter girl over here, and I would be like, you know, pink is for grammar, and you know, and I had like this system, and I tried to be quick, but I was like very used to writing on physical paper to do my feedback and circling and, you know, highlighting and moving things around. And when I started receiving papers in a digital format, especially in systems like Blackboard and Collab, I would get the paper and I would download it, and then I would annotate on it, and then I would save it, and then I would re-upload it to give it to them. And so Canvas obviously has some tools that makes that easier. But digital feedback to some takes more time. Now that I'm good at it and I know some shortcuts and I have some like common things that I'm always going over with students in my field, I've found ways to be quicker about this. But for some, digital feedback is just this really administrative burden. The fact that I have to type it or record it or present it in that way is uncomfortable. And then the last thing, which I would probably say is the number one thing I hear around here, is that the students may not have like the technical competency in like things like Word or Excel or SSPS or, you know, whatever statistical packages you're using, all those other things. And faculty are finding they're spending a lot of their time on technical support, whether it's the LMS, email, Word, Excel, other platforms. And that faculty, even when they try to point students towards resources for who are like specialists in those things, that those questions still tend to come to the faculty member because that's where the relationship is. So another thing to think about is what's next, right? I've built it, but now what? Is kind of thinking through what are these common concerns and how can I take advantage of either design or present solutions to mitigate some of these. So email quantity. Number one thing that you can do is have a question space. And this is like a tricky wicket because remember reliable and regular interaction. You can create a question space and you can even encourage students to answer other students' questions, which can be very effective because I find 9 times out of 10 the answer's in the syllabus and just no one goes back and looks. But the one stellar student always knows what's in the syllabus and can share and tell the others what's in it. But you kind of have to troll your question spaces. So it's a commitment. If you do decide to have a question space, then you need to occasionally and regularly and reliably check that question space. And so this deals with email quantity. It also deals with repetitive questions. You also have to, you know, sometimes set those standards of like, please don't ask questions about your grades in like this space, right? These are like class-wide questions. I often hear the stories of the student who's like, I don't understand why I got a B. And you're like, no, not in the class-wide forum. That's a personal conversation, right? So we're going to get to expectation setting. That's one of the things. Group activities and building social interaction is important because it can also help mitigate this email quantity and repetitive question thing, right? Because if they have started to build a rapport relationships with other students, they can and will text each other, right? And talk with each other in whatever other like media or platform they prefer to talk in. And a great example of this is in our synchronous classes. We have some rough sense of like what we call back channeling. So we'll have some faculty teaching synchronously online, and if something is unclear or someone has a question, it's often posted unbeknownst to the faculty member in the class chat in Zoom, and then the students are helping answer that question, but like class is carrying on, right? And so class time doesn't stop, but like the question usually gets answered. But they have to have that rapport. That rapport comes in Zoom classes because they see each other, they're physically hearing each other speak, and they start to share information and they have that ability to back channel. So a little bit of a different take there, but it's important. Canvas has a lot of ways that you can automate feedback. And a really good strategy in a tool like Canvas or really any LMS is to automate feedback when you can. And I get some pushback on this, right? Because automated feedback will at times be non-specific, right, to the learner. But let's say you have some, like a really short comprehension quiz, right? You gave a kind of difficult reading. You want to make sure that they kind of walked away with the key components of that said reading. There's a way to build a, whether it's short answer or multiple choice, kind of check-in quiz, right? That should be worth credit, otherwise they won't do it. But that can have automated feedback that pops up that's not necessarily user specific, but can help guide them to what they do need to take away. And just the action of thinking about it, taking the quiz and seeing the feedback, which highlights where in the readings that information was. Students are significantly more successful when they have those kind of interactions, like those experiences with that automated feedback, than when they wait for you to look at a paper or some other kind of reading where you're typing out feedback. And the great thing is once you create those, if you reuse those readings, you can reuse those. So it's a kind of build it once, use it in multiple places kind of thing. And lastly, this is both with technical competency and support, but really with a lot of these other ones, you could consider a reward structure for students supporting one another. This can take a lot of different avenues. And some people look at me like, oh, really? It might not be like class points, right? Because you're trying to build like competency and like skills in the class. But if you have students who are regularly, posting in that questions forum, or they're taking a like technical lead in the class by helping support others, maybe their lowest quiz score gets dropped. You know what I mean? Maybe they get a get out of this assignment free card. Maybe they get 30 minutes with you to go over their final assignment and everyone else gets 15. So there can be a reward structure for investing in the community of learners. That can look a lot of different ways, but there is some like new research going on around what does it mean to like reward competency in things, whether it's the learning or stuff like tech and classroom administration stuff, and what peer support can start to look like now that we have new channels and avenues to deliver it. Okay, last thing, expectations. So I apologize if this is a little fuzzy, but I really liked it. I was thinking at Christmas this year about mismatched expectations. I have small children and they asked Santa for gifts, and I don't want to ruin anything for anyone, but I'm Santa. And they didn't ask me for certain things. So Christmas morning came and they were like, where are my Dino trucks? And I was like, what? Because I didn't know, right? And they did not get any. Like, so they had this expectation that Santa was going to read their minds and like give them Dino trucks. They never asked me for Dino trucks, so I did not provide Dino trucks, right? So often, a physical classroom comes with a series of expectations, right? Just the physical space of a classroom, the way we set it up, the fact that the instructor stands up front, all those things set up a series of expectations. It's like the wild, wild west in online. But we often go in, both as faculty and as students, with expectations that we are not communicating to one another. Like, I expect that I only have to respond to you Monday through Friday, where my students are like, this is an online class with no walls. I'm going to hear from her in 5 minutes. And when I don't, I'm going to get mad and send her another email, right? So how can we make sure everyone is happier and gets the Dino trucks under the Christmas tree? And that's by setting expectations with each other. So some thoughts about this. And I actually forgot, activity. How do you set those expectations in face-to-face? Do you do anything to set them, or do they just come? So take a minute and then we'll dive in. I got excited. This is my favorite one. Sorry about that. Can she hear? She's back. Hi, Susan.
Yeah. So there's some more cash in there, probably.
But that's what it's like.
Yeah. She tried to find out. Still mostly.
Yeah, whatever.
The only time I've seen that is like if it's frozen.
No,
I mean,
like,
what do you need? Like, it's still right there.
It's my focus is take of like, as your instructor, it's my expectation, not students, but your expectation, so I know. What works.
I love what you're talking about. Let's dive in because this is exactly where we want to go. So how do those expectations get set? Like I said about the face, how else do we set those expectations in face-to-face instruction? Silence now. It's like a regular class. Everyone clams up.
I mean, in my face-to-face classes, I did the same thing I did with my elementary students. The first point of the class started, I'd say, okay, what are our norms and expectations for the class? They all write down a few individually. I have table groups talk and they come up with like their top 3, then all tables share out. I write them on the board. Then I say, okay, what commonalities do we have? And we narrow it down to like
Mhm.
3 big ones that we use in the class, and they're usually the 3 big ones I have in my mind. And I just like,
You're like, yes.
do that.
Yeah, you're like, no.
And I kind of did the same thing online. Like during my introduction week, I said, what do you all want? And then I had them all like say these things, but instead of the like group collaborative like synthesis, I just kind of synthesized what they told me. But I said, if anyone disagrees with me, let me know. Nobody disagrees, so we're good.
Any other thoughts?
I think sometimes like the discussion of like, what does that look like and sound like? It's one thing to like know what the expectation is, but another to really like flesh out that kind of translational piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Every time I click into Zoom, it doesn't want to like move forward. So here are some things that I recommend along that same spirit that you ask of yourself before even committing to teaching online. So what am I going to tell students about my response time, right? And setting those like limits of your barriers. Faculty do need to protect themselves, especially in the online space, because it can get overwhelming. Here's some other things about the how you can contact me. How many of you have had a student try to friend you on Facebook or other forms of social media, right? What's your policy around that? I had a coworker who, I see the face. Yeah, there's things in my past Facebook feed that I don't want people seeing, right? Or I don't want them to know what my children look like. But maybe later, either once they've graduated or after they're done with my class and I know I won't be teaching them again, then maybe I want to open up that kind of semi-professional, right, relationship. So how can I be contacted, you know, and save the student the trouble and heartache, by the way, of like friending you and you ignoring it, right? Instead, you can say up front, I would love to be friends with you one day. Today's not that day, but maybe, you know, when you graduate, right? Or whatever. Consider me a part of your network. Yeah.
Unrelated issue.
Yeah.
Does Curry have any like official stance as far as like instructors giving out their like personal cell phones?
I did let them know.
Yeah. But that's a great point. Everyone's like, oh, I feel this.
It's like 8 years later.
How is anyone giving out their personal cell phone number to students? Adjuncts do. Yeah.
So my cell phone forwards this forwards to my cell phone, and then if I return their call, then they get it.
Yeah.
It
No way to
doesn't-
stop that.
Wow, that's not terrible. I think that it would show that number.
Every once in a while it could go real
Yeah.
wrong. Not, you know, hopefully not, but every once in a while it can. I had a very disgruntled student once and I got some like choice texts, which was a bad choice on her part because I could then like screenshot them for later like
Susan
protection.
says on Zoom that she gives it to them, but she tells them no calls will be returned after 8.
There you go.
And most
Again.
students don't have a phone to use for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I
Yeah.
have to get on my personal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's a whole other thing. But there are some strategies. So if you don't want text but are willing to take a call, you could set up a Google number that forwards to your cell phone. So at least, and I like stop a Google number after every class, and then I will reestablish a new one so that that's no longer a line of communication for those folks. But I also let them know that, right? This is a Google Voice number. And so I will get your messages. This will forward to my cell phone. I'm not comfortable giving you that information. Don't text me because I won't get a text from you here. Yeah, absolutely. thinking about grading and feedback, they did this survey about faculty about like email questions, and the number one question that faculty get over like across the nation is, when will I get my grade for that? So telling people up front, and again, being regular and reliable about that will save you a lot of headaches and like unnecessary email on the student's part and on your part. Also pointing them in multiple places to where help is available, whether that be academic help, whether that be technological help. If that help is where they need it, when they need it, they will use it. That's kind of the mentality about it. So when we just put it on our syllabus, it's not in the right place that they need it to be when they're having trouble submitting that assignment. So instead, at the end of every assignment, and this is like a cut and paste, right? And you do it once, you reuse it. If you're having trouble submitting this assignment or submitting this activity or using this technology, this is where you go. And it's right where they need it, where they're going to submit it. So they're not looking for it later in the syllabus on some page because they kind of vaguely remember seeing it, right? And it's also important though, so like Ariel was saying, that we ask students what kind of things that we think they should be responsible for, and what's reasonable to kind of set as expectations of the class. So how, you know, students often ask me how, I'm an online learner, I don't know how often I should log into a class. Well, maybe you should discuss that as a class, or have some ideas about that as the faculty member. Students, especially here at Curry, because a lot of them are professional adults who are working, who have other email addresses, they're not always checking their UVA email. So setting this expectation of important information might be there. And it sounds like we shouldn't have to say these things, but let's be real, we have to say these things. We know we have to say them, let's just say them. Review of feedback. Again, it sounds like what? But I require that students look at my feedback that I took the time to respond, and I actually require that they respond to it. It helps us like establish the dialogue, and you have a mechanism by which that can occur. You've given them some kind of written or video feedback. There's nothing preventing them from right there where the feedback is, hitting reply and saying, thank you, or I have a question about X, or now that you've said this, now I'm gonna go do Y, right? And that helps, again, keep that presence going. And then also setting some expectations about responses to classmates. So online instruction, it's so common to be like, you're in a discussion, you have to respond to like 2 classmates within like 3 days of the post, right? That's not real life, right? So how do we set and reward like good behaviors, and how do we decide as a class, right, what would be an appropriate amount of like communication and response? Most of my classes, by the way, I've like need to write a paper about this one day. I've asked this question. In most of my classes, the students say, you should always respond to someone who responds to you, which faculty very rarely make as the stipulation of a discussion, but that's actually the student's expectation. We set a lower expectation. We set a lower bar for them that they don't go beyond because we've set a lower bar. But what happens when you ask the students what they think that should look like? I think you can get some really meaningful responses from that.
Do you know, is there anything about like the size of the group related to the quality of discussion? Because I've played around with like using groups and people
Mhm.
can set it up, and have found that like when they're in groups of like, you know, between like 4 and 8 people, they tend to post more and have better quality posts than when it's like a whole class
Mhm.
discussion.
Mhm. So all of that comes back to the data about social interaction. So when you are tracking communication between a smaller group of people, whatever that number might be, and there is some data, I want to say like 6.8 people, which is really helpful, right, is like your max, that you can physically see someone's face in your mind when it's that few people. But when you start talking about 20 people or 30 people or 80 people, as in some of our larger like special ed sections, suddenly everyone becomes this faceless, nameless thing, and you're just kind of going with the motions, right? So wherever we can make it personable is where you will see deeper engagement. So, and you can do that in large classes, right? So you can have 80 people, but you'll have 10 groups of 8, right? Or 10, or what, I'm not good at math. Let's just English major. But however, 6 divided into 80, you're with me. Okay, good. Okay. Yes. Susan, do you want to speak, Susan? We might be able to hear you. We might not. Oh.
You need to unmute.
I don't think so. She's,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
I'm having a lot of sound issues today. I was just going to say around the group chat, I really notice a difference when I've had smaller sections with the larger sections of students. It's really hard for me to follow the discussion when I use the Canvas grouping feature. It's a little difficult to navigate.
That's true.
But it's better for the students, I think.
Yeah, that's a fun balance too. What is the personal cost to us and what's better to students? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's also, when they do that, I haven't found a way so that like students can see other groups' discussions that they want to.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I've been replicating the discussion board, and I just have more than one copy of it.
One thing I've
That's a
done
lot.
is that you have
You do a
small
lot.
group, and then you get like a good order or summarizer, and then you have a large group discussion. So summarizer posts.
Yeah.
What was talked about in the large group.
So then it's like a synthesis.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, this is the plan for these is to reserve the last few minutes to talk about whether this topic or if you guys have Canvas or online learning questions. So it's kind of a general open forum about whatever might be on your mind. And then a plug, now that I turn that up, about our next one. Please come back. At the end, the last Wednesday in March, we're going to be talking about media in a sense. And there will be other yummy lunch, TBD what it will be. So RSVP, and I will we send out a monthly message that's going to all our doctoral students and faculty about just like online Canvas-y stuff, and we'll have a registration link if you haven't already registered, but I think some of you have already, so thank you for doing that. So any general questions or comments or things you'd like to discuss?
I have a
Yes.
very detailed thing discussion, but maybe not good for discussion, but I was meeting with adjuncts this morning, and we were talking about the issue of people who are long posters, like their initial threads are well over the word limit.
Mhm.
And we were, the question came up that as you're typing a post, the word count is there displayed for you, but once the post is posted, it's not. And so as instructors, we're right now copying that off, pasting it into Word to measure word count. Is there any feature that can help us with that?
I don't think there's a great feature for it, but, and I think it's a setting in settings. I think because faculty have the ability, I think you can edit a student post, which a lot of faculty don't know that you can do.
I don't think I've done it.
No, you don't have to actually edit it, but my point is when you click into edit, you can see the word count. So you wouldn't have to copy it or like go take those words elsewhere to measure it, if that is part
But you
of the
think that I
concern.
could change settings so that the word count stays visible?
It wouldn't stay visible, but you would have an option to just like click something to be able to see it instead of having to copy and move
All
the
right, I need
text.
to look it up.
And I'll look it up too. So follow up, help team. Yep, they're on it.
All right, great. Thank you. I won't look it up.
No, the other thing I would say or recommend is on some of my discussions, because you can tie a rubric to a discussion, and I will do a very basic rubric to give them the quote unquote grade or participation for the discussion. And it's like a one or nothing of did you meet the word, you know what I mean? And roughly I begin to be able to eyeball it because it's small, you know what I mean? And so I can tell very quickly if someone's exceeded 100 words or 200 words or whatever I might have said that to be. And that's it. Like you're out, game's over. Because I think teaching student, and this is my English teacher hat coming out, right? But teaching them to be able to write in multiple contexts and to be able to write expansive things, but also to be able to be brief is like a desperate skill.
I think as a student, the hard part with that is we'll have criteria for what we have to meet in the discussion post. Like we have to answer all of these questions, each of the example, yet we're only allowed to write 200 words. And you're like, okay, so which one should I do? Should I try to hit the word count or should I try to actually answer the questions?
And then, yeah, and then it's like trial and error. So you try one and you get rejected, and you're like, okay, try the other one, and then you're like, it's all like,
Yeah.
it goes back to expectations.
Yep.
Like what?
And these are things, I think it's good for us all to get in rooms and have these kind of conversations, because I bet a lot of faculty don't realize that students feel that tension. Now, some of you might listen to that and you might feel like with additional counseling, maybe they could meet both, right? Or maybe there's other strategies, but I see their faces and they're like, nah, man, some of these questions are really detailed. And if I'm gonna feel like I'm addressing it fully, 200 words isn't realistic. But then I also say to you, and when you think about your discussion questions, you know, what are you trying to accomplish, going back to your learning outcomes too, and thinking about prioritizing, right, what they need to accomplish in that discussion.
I usually allow like a choice of which discussion questions. I don't usually have people have to answer all of them. There are very few instances where they're required, but still, we definitely were talking about, like, I haven't been consistent in enforcing word limit, and going on too long gets to be like,
It's no fun for
talking too much
anybody.
in the session. You like a face-to-face message.
Right.
Like I do right now.
And well, no, you're not. She is funny. No, but that's like a facilitator's responsibility, right? And I would say in face-to-face, that's one of my weaknesses, is I really want people to be heard. So I'll let them go, and I talk too much. So I'm like, oh, go ahead. But in online, I'm like the boss. I'm like, cut it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different, you know, that's different. I'm differently successful there. So that's part of your job as a facilitator. So if you know that length becomes like onerous for you and others, like you're doing that student a disservice by not, I hate to say not, you know, it's not about points, but it's about helping guide them, right, about the appropriate length. Also, to their point about Miss Mack's expectations, I'm a big fan of showing a sample discussion. So in talks of like you copying and putting discussions, but if you ever have a great example, I get the permission from the students in that class and be like, can I show other students like how this went, so they can see how rich and like meaningful and appropriately length these posts could be. I think that can be very, and they don't have to read it closely, right? But they can kind of get a sense, and it's nice to be able to turn to a model when someone's not doing or not meeting your expectations to say, this is like the A+ standard. If we can get closer to this, right, you're going to be much more successful. Other questions? Headaches? Concerns? No? Did I meet the learning outcomes? All right, good. I hope I did, because on the back side of your handout is, I'd love for you all to physically write right now one thing that hopefully you took away that you can do when you're teaching online, or maybe even you're not teaching online, you're teaching face-to-face, but you're using Canvas or some other system to help support your classes. So please write that one thing that you think you can do. And I know who almost all of you are, and I'm gonna run into you like in the hallway, and I'm gonna ask you if you did it. I promise I will find you. Accountability also creates presence. But thank you guys for coming today. And Susan, we're at a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you for hanging out with the technical issues, Susan.
Oh, yes.